Hey everyone, welcome to Be the Change. My name is Lily Mott, and today's episode is about how change comes through collaboration and community. I have been following along with this guest's work for quite a while now, and I'm so thrilled to be able to share her story with you today. Arissa Roy is the founder and CEO of Project Power Global, which is a nonprofit on a mission to spread awareness about the lack of access to education and to help solve the problem by directly supporting communities in need. I love this work Arissa's doing, and this conversation was right up my alley, so let's dive into this episode featuring Arissa Roy.
Yeah, so a bit about me. When I was 14, I started an NGO called Project Power Global to advocate for equitable access to education. But the whole journey of that actually started just after my very first trip to India, which I took in 2018 with my family to go back to connect with our relatives who still live in India. And when I was there, I was about 12, and it was my very first real glimpse into the scale of global poverty, for instance, and how, for example, education for many people is one of those tools that can help lift communities out of cyclical poverty. And I learned that when I was able to visit a local school and talk to students who were the same age as me at the time. And, it was really interesting going there because the school that I went to, it was not at all like what I was used to growing up in Toronto, in Canada. And they had very humble conditions, but yet just the ability to read and write was something that they all wanted to do and to have access to help bring their families out of poverty. And I realized that's so amazing. But I thought about all the other young people that I had seen when I was there who didn't have those same opportunities. And I was quite shocked by that because I always knew that education was a right, that we all have the right to learn and to have cool growth experiences, but still remains really inaccessible to people around the world. So after that trip, I came home and I was like, I want to do something about this. So I wrote in this notebook that I still have somewhere here today about this charity that I wanted to start. But, I was a very shy 12-year-old, so I didn't have the confidence to do that until the pandemic came in 2020 when, everything kind of shut down and I was given all this time. And personally, I was very inspired by, the selflessness of our frontline healthcare workers who risked so much to go and help other people that I thought, if they can do this, why can't I do something to advocate for a cause that I'm passionate about? So that's where I started Project Power Global. And to date, we've done several different initiatives all around education, from helping, for example, Ukrainian refugees who came to Canada when the war started, and, helping youth get support to start school here. We've done a lot of work in India. In 2024, we did a project around Afghan girls' education and was able to collaborate with one of my friends who is Afghan and has an organization that works locally. And we were able to help build a library for girls to access, a secret sort of safe library for them to access during this time. And then from there, my work grew to collaborate with other organizations like Plan International, Fridays for Future, doing climate advocacy work. And most recently, something I'm really excited about is 2 years ago, I started working with UNESCO on their SDG for Youth and Student Network, which is basically kind of like a big youth council for UNESCO with people from all over the world. And this year, I got reinvited to join for another 2 years. And I actually haven't shared this anywhere, so I guess this is a first thing. But I was recently elected as the youth representative for Europe and North America, so a bit bigger of a platform there. So I'm really excited about that. And yeah, besides this, I recently graduated from United World College of the Adriatic in Italy, and it's one of 18 international schools that young people can access from all over the world. And we basically come together and finish high school. So I was in Italy for 2 years with peers from 83 countries. And it was the most amazing experience. And I've learned a lot from that, which I'm sure we can dive into more. But yeah, I'm on a gap year now. So that's kind of me and where I'm at.
Yeah, that's amazing. That just sounds so wonderful. And I feel like you've done so much work around the world, and of course met so many people from around the world. And it sounds like your experience has just been so far reaching, which I think is incredible. How do you see the different causes that you're working on coming together, and what does that kind of intersectionality look like for you? What's making you choose some of these projects? Tell me a little bit about that and just kind of the way that you've bounced around a bit, because I think it's so incredible. But I know a lot of people kind of focus on, their one area or their one issue, but you get to do a ton of different things, a jack of all trades. So tell me about that for you.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, since I started in this work, I've always seen, advocacy to be very intersectional. For example, I, for about 3 years, alongside when I was starting Project Power Global, PBG, which I call it for short, I also was brought on to work with a Canadian organization called Unsinkable, which was founded by a former Canadian Olympian named Silke Laumann. And it was all about using storytelling as a means to uplift people and inspire them to have more conversations around mental health and well-being. And, it's really interesting because through that work, I was inspired to, do more work in the education field around social and emotional education because, a lot of the time when I talk about my advocacy, people are like, oh, so you're just advocating for like more schools and like people to go to school. And I'm like, no, like that's not the education is so much more than school. Actually, I think a lot of our education systems are quite outdated, I would say, and not yet functioning in a way that's keeping up with the times. For example, I was in the Netherlands speaking at the IB Global Conference. For those who don't know what IB is, stands for the International Baccalaureate, and it is sort of a global like education system. But I did IB because it was the diploma that we offered that's offered at UWC. And during my speech, I shared about a lot of the ways that I struggled, my peers struggled in terms of, balancing being in a really cool learning environment with people from all over the world who want to do like real life projects to make impact. But then, because of the framework of the IB, just couldn't because you had to study like all the time in order to succeed. Which, to be honest, I did not. Like, I was not very successful in my IB, and I shared that. So, I think when we talk about the SDGs, for example, like there's a reason why they're so connected and they're all there at the same time, like SDG 4, which is where I work on primarily, but it's so connected to climate, to mental health, to all these things, because even working in the climate space with Fridays for Future, huge element of that was educating, our local communities about why is climate action so important. And one of our very first initiatives at my NGO, Project Power Global, was something called the Pen Pal program, where we wanted to connect students from North America, from Canada, because that's where I have most of my connections, to schools we were working with in India, where basically the youth in 2 different parts of the world did a 5-week program on 5 different global issues, one of them being climate change, for example. And they were able to come up with projects and in their own communities to address some of these issues, but also communicate and like have conversations with a pen pal from across the world to talk about, what do these issues look like in their communities. And that project, like we saw how, having conversations with people who are not from your community is really interesting because you're able to then be more of a critical thinker in terms of how does this, how does climate change look like in Canada versus India? What are things, that are different? So anyway, long story short, I think like education, yes, is my central focus, but it's so interconnected with all the other things that I've done. And yeah, like in terms of seeing change and peace, for example, like I think peace is, it's not simple. It's a combination of many things. And you kind of need all the pieces in the puzzle to create the finished product, right? So that's how I see it.
No, I love that. And I do think, in my own opinion, because my parents are both teachers, actually, so a lot of my first social action and advocacy work that I did was actually in the education space. And I did some work in South America, and it was wonderful. And I got to meet some young women in Cusco, Peru, who were doing work to try to get to university. And I think I had a lot of the same realizations that people were fighting so hard for this education that I really took for granted at the time, I must say. And so I think for me, education is that kind of foundation for so many of these other issues. So just to say, I totally agree. And I love that. So
Yeah.
I would love to know what motivates you to kind of keep doing a lot of this work. I know, of course, you're tackling these huge systemic issues often, and you are making really positive change to chip away at some of those really big topics. But what keeps you going? How do you take time for yourself? What does that look like for you?
Thank you for the question. And I'm also really curious to know your perspective on that. So maybe I could share and then you can share too. I'm curious because I know you are also very involved in many different projects in this space. I think for me, there are several things, but the most prominent, I would say, are stories of people that I've worked with or I've had the privilege of being friends with while I was away at school at UWC. I think storytelling is one of our generation's most powerful tools. I'm obviously biased because I'm Gen Z, so I love, I'm always like Gen Z is gonna like change the world and like, it's gonna be better because of us and the work we're doing, But I think it's because we've sort of realized how even platforms like social media can be used. And even just this, like your podcast, like this is a huge platform to raise awareness about all these other issues. And I think the power of hearing stories, at least for me, it's the reason why I've kept going. Starting from the stories I heard that very first trip to India to the stories of the kids we worked with in the Pen Pal program, or hearing the feedback of how the girls in Afghanistan reacted to our project, or working with Ukrainian refugees like here in Canada, like hearing their stories. Like all these things have really motivated me to keep going. And also, I think that there's a lot of terrible things happening in the world right now, as we all know. If we look at Sudan, Congo, Gaza, all these places suffering from terrible and inhumane and not just crimes and war and genocide and all these things. And I think it's really easy to feel like you can't do anything about it. But I'm a huge believer in the ripple effect of change. I actually, when I was 16, I wrote it's just a small children's book about that because my grandmother, she would always encourage me to, think about how my actions in my life can impact more and more. And you never actually know how far that impact will go. And so, I think that a lot of us want to help change the world, and we think that it has to be done in huge ways, but I don't think that's true. I think it's done through small, everyday actions that add up. And I think once you know that and realize that, and then, of course, have stories of people that inspire you, then you just keep going. At least that's how I've, had that experience. So, yeah.
I love that. I think that was also like the perfect segue to my next question for you. But I actually do think I totally agree with the stories perspective. I think hearing from other people and hearing what they have gone through sometimes and what they've managed to do with that circumstance or with those challenges, I think that's what really keeps me going, because it's wonderful to hear, stories from people who have taken situations that they've been in or they've seen and they channel that into change. I think it's so brave. And yeah, I love stories. So I'm absolutely there with you. But my last question for you is, lots of young people might want to create change and make a difference, but they might not know how to get started with that work. What advice would you want to share with those people who might be listening?
For sure. First of all, I was in your boat. I was in your position, and trust me, I think there's a lot of like, once you get in this space, it's like, oh, I'm not doing enough. Oh, like I could be doing more, or like this and that. First of all, I would say do not compare yourself to anybody, because everyone's different and everyone has access to different tools and resources in their own communities. Change starts at home. That's what I really believe. If you're passionate about an issue, start in your local community. I think it's really inspiring to see the impact of your actions in person and like seeing that. So I feel like just start there, and then from there, reach out to people, connect with people, ask for help. These are all ways that I've been able to grow my work. Also just networking, doing collaboration. Another thing I would say is like, I feel like too many young people in this space, like we work in like silos. We're not really working as a collective. And I know I've fallen into that. So I'm also going to say like, that's something I'm trying to work on. But I think that there's so many of us who are passionate about the same things and want to see the same change happen, that we should just collaborate and like work together and share resources and all these things. So there's that. And then I would also say like literally just do it. Like I started Project Power Global by posting something on my Instagram that had like 200 followers, like not a significant amount. And it was just like my personal people that I like knew in my life, And it just started by me saying like, I want to start this project, like literally like DM or text me if you want to help. And it was just like me and like my 3 like close friends and my brother. Like he helped me like all these years, my brother. So you don't have to be like someone who's well known in the world to create change. Like everyone has the ability to do that. And like I just want to say, like, if you are looking for someone to like believe in you, like I really believe in the power of young people. And like I said earlier, like I feel like Gen Z is amazing, and like we're going to see a lot of improvement in the world. So I would say also like leverage technology and even like social media, of course, in ways that remain true and humble and like safe for you. But I think I would not be where I am today without like platforms like even Instagram or like LinkedIn, for example, because even though I think social media can be really harmful for many, so much lives on social media, like so many things, like so many people are there, and that's how a lot of us are getting our information or getting like, news and all these things. So really leverage that. And say when you don't know how to do something. Like I'm also trying to learn how to grow social media and like how to share online like in a better way. So, and that's something I'm like openly like trying to learn about. So I would say, remain open to like new learning. So that's my advice.
I really resonate with so much of what Arissa shared throughout this episode, and if this were a video podcast, you would have seen I was just excessively nodding my head throughout this entire conversation with Arissa. And I want to highlight Arissa's last advice about the importance of collaboration and community. So many of us are passionate about making the same or similar changes in the world. So rather than duplicating efforts or competing for limited resources, let's collaborate. And the best place to start making change is in your community, either in person or in online spaces like social media, which Arissa mentioned. I think that was great advice. And I really hope that you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. And please keep in mind that change comes through collaboration and community. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and you can find Arissa on Instagram and LinkedIn, and I included those links in the description of this episode. If you want to talk about anything I mentioned, please reach out to me by email at lily@bethechangepodcast.org or on Instagram at Be The Change Media Network. I'm working on expanding Be The Change Media Network, which means bringing you more inspiring stories from amazing guests. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave the podcast a rating and a comment, because it will help these stories to reach, educate, and inspire more people. and I would also love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Tune in for my next episode, but until then, be the change you wish to see in the world. Bye, guys.